This session, we're going to explain the differences between a systematic review, meta-analysis, and a literature review. So I'm still a facilitator. All right, now, so the roadmap for our discussion tonight is just going to be a very juicy one, right? So we're going to start by explaining what is a review. Then from there, we'll go on to talk about introduction to various types of reviews. Then we're going to talk about what's systematic review, what's a meta-analysis. Again, we'll have a revisit on that. We're going to talk about what's a literature review, what are the differences, and when do we use each approach, and also practice exercise. Now, what we need to understand is that when performing your systematic review or literature review or any type of academic writing, there are considerations that are very imperative to be put into, particularly when it is dealing with you reviewing what has already been done in other studies. Now, starting from what is a review, we are going to have a detailed understanding of what a review entails. Then we look at also what are the various types of reviews. Then we now examine what a systematic review happens to be, a meta-analysis, a detailed approach of what a meta-analysis entails, then the literature review, differences, and when to use it. So that was just a rundown of what I said previously. That is actually a very beautiful, handsome picture. I said beautiful and handsome together. He's introducing us to the review. When we talk about a review in research, a review is just a way to look at lots of different studies or research papers to see what we already know about the topic. And so you can actually put it up to anything, right? So it's just like there are a lot of pieces of papers out there. So you've got to pick them together, right? To now tell us what do we know about each bundle of paper. So that's just like a simple example of what the review is. So to a 10-year-old, a review is like reading a bunch of different books or articles about a same topic. So that topic could be on, maybe it could be on malaria, right? To understand everything people have discovered about it. So you want to read a lot of papers or books or articles about a particular topic to understand what insights are actually present in that topic. So it's just like doing research to get the full story. Now, this series of this lecture is actually a very simple and explicit one, right? Because we want to make it very, very understandable. We want to make it very detailed for you to have the foundational knowledge of what the review entails before stepping into the practice and the practicals of this particular series. So why do we do reviews? So just like when you check multiple sources to write the best report for school, right? So we do reviews to find the best and most complete answers to important questions by looking at a lot of research in one go. So let's assume you've got numerous papers, right? So, and you want to find out which of them is best at reporting something. So a review now is more of like going through all these papers to find out the one that contains the best evidence. Now, this is actually what we call the onion, right? The review onion. I'm going to call it the onion. I know a lot of us really like onions, right? I usually like putting onion in my noodles, if I want to eat my noodles, right? So, but before I open the onion or try to slice it, sometimes I might decide to peel off the back. So the back is what we know as what we call the traditional review. So when I open it, inside of it is a systematic review. Then at the very center, the heart of my onion, which I use for my noodles, is known as the meta-analysis. So we have various types of reviews in research, right? So usually we've got the ones there are many of them, like we have the systematic reviews, the narrative reviews, the rapid reviews, the meta-analysis, editorial reviews, plain reviews, right? So all these things all form under the research onion. So it depends on where you find them. So here now at this perimeter here, you find all the reviews. So any kind of thing you put together, you can decide to write the love letter to your wife or to your spouse, right? And review literature on love and send it to her. That is a very beautiful review. That's a review. So when it now starts following a guideline, it becomes a what? A systematic review. And when you now decide to pull statistical evidence from that letter, it becomes a what? A meta-analysis, or systematic reviews with what? Meta-analysis. So for every meta-analysis, it has to go through a systematic review for you to have the what? Meta-analysis. So some other type of reviews are what we call the scoping reviews and integrative reviews. But for the sake of this lecture series, right, we will focus more on what? Systematic reviews. So we have other types of reviews which we know as narrative. In front of the narrative here, you're just trying to do what? You've raised up a certain research question, and you might not really actually have a certain what guideline to follow to address your question. So in that scenario, it becomes a what? A narrative review. So we've got the rapid reviews, meta-analysis, editorial plan review. So for the scoping reviews, right, it's all about raising a particular question and mapping all the available research on it. So unlike a systematic review where it has to be very rigorous, a scoping review can actually include any type of study that is what? Focused on that question, including scoping reviews and systematic reviews. Now, but we're going to talk about this on the long run, and we're going to show practice on it. Now, also, we also have what we call the integrative reviews. So the integrative reviews are also part of this, but we won't really classify them as our what? As a systematic review because of its what? Or its approach, but it's also a type of what review. Now, the major types of reviews that we are going to actually focus on for this module is what? The differences between what we call the systematic literature review, the meta-analysis, and the what? And the traditional literature review. Now, think about your research project or your PhD dissertation. Your PhD dissertation usually contains your traditional literature review, which is usually found in the chapter 2 of your work. So if you look at the chapter 2 of your PhD dissertation, right, you will find the what? You're going to find your traditional literature review. Then when you move further, if you're doing a full PhD systematic review dissertation, then in your 4th and 5th chapter, that's where you perform your what? A systematic review, where you're going to synthesize findings. So I'm going to show an example of what I mean by opening a file to demonstrate what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to talk about. Now, this is a review. This is a full systematic review dissertation on barriers and facilitators to implementing electronic health records in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, when you look at the chapter 2 of this dissertation, right, you find out that what? This is what we call the normal literature review. Right? This is usually the traditional literature review. It's written without what? Any structure. It's written without following any particular guideline. Now, but when you proceed to the 4th and 5th chapter, right? When you proceed to the methods, you get to the results, right? This is where what? The synthesis, right? The systematic review is what's being synthesized. This is where the studies are now what? Synthesized. So we'll explain that in the future on. Now, whereas in the case of a meta-analysis, you will remember our paper that we published on what? Prevalence of what? Antibiotic what? Resistance in what? In older adults. So when we hover around this and open this paper, right, we'll find out that what? That it's used the what? It contains what? A meta-analysis. And you know that a meta-analysis has to pass through what? A systematic review process. So this is a very detailed example of what we'll be talking about, but along the line we'll still be showing more examples to differentiate between a systematic literature review, a meta-analysis, and a normal literature review. Now, what is a systematic review? Now, in our first session, we already covered this, that a systematic review is where you gather information, right? And you follow one specific, maybe let's say it's when you gather a lot of studies that is trying to address a particular specific question. Now you're following a guideline. Now understand that the difference in systematic review, the keyword there is what? A specific guideline. And we're going to also discuss this what in our future session. So that specific guideline can be what we call the what? The Prisma checklist, it can be the COSO checklist, it can be any type of checklist, but it is mandatory that when we are conducting any systematic review, right, we must follow a what? A specific guideline. So it's also just here, right, we explain that to make sure we understand the whole story by looking at the important studies on that question without leaving anything out or being biased. So systematic review is all about being a step by step. We follow a systematic process. Remember the key word there by this beautiful baby, systematic. So it is a review that is what? Systematic. So it means that it has to follow a step by step plan, which is systematic, where you have to state your search process, your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and other what? Criteria. Now, contrary to a meta-analysis, just as this beautiful girl is holding this placard, right? The meta-analysis now is just like a systematic review, but in this case, we are more concerned with what? Effect and what? Numerical comparison. So we want to pull together a systematic review. We want to pull together findings from different data and use a statistical and get a statistical estimate of those data. We're going to also explain this in details. Don't worry, you're going to get to understand what we're talking about. So if you look at this paper here, right, that was published recently, right? So if you look at the forest plot here, you find that we pulled down the overall effect as what? 1.87, and that is it here. So we combined findings from all these studies, the statistical findings from all these studies, to have a what? An overall what? Effect. That is just what a meta-analysis is concerned about. A systematic review can be combining textual data, but in terms of a meta-analysis, we're only interested in what? Pulling together what? Numerical what? Data. So we go ahead. Now how about the literature review? The literature review is a summary that you will just try to pull what is already known about the topic. So you remember when I did show you the PhD dissertation chapter 2, right? So a literature review is what most of us have done in your primary research during your undergraduate days or during your master's degree, right? You're usually asked to write your chapter 2. You just put up anything you want. You don't usually follow any guideline. It's not systematic. Unlike in a systematic review where you have to follow a Prisma guideline to write your literature review. In your literature review, you just have to do what? Come up with any heading that is what? Of importance to you. And you do what? You just answer a research question. That is just what a literature review is usually all about. Now, this is just the onion, just the same way I explained, right? We've got the literature reviews to be the outside broad ones, right? So a literature review will bet a systematic review, which is inside of it, and you've got a meta-analysis, which is what? Gotten from a what? Systematic review. So a meta-analysis deals more with what? Quantitative what? Estimates, right? When we try to pull numbers what? Together to address what? A stipulated what? Question. Now we are getting there. Now looking at the differences, because before you start your research, you start your literature review or systematic review, it is very important for you to know the criteria that differentiates between a literature review, a meta-analysis, and a systematic review. Now, in terms of purpose, it is known that a literature review provides an overview or summary of existing knowledge and theories on a topic. So it's usually broad. For a literature review, it's usually broad. So it tries to summarize everything that is available. Whereas in terms of purpose for a meta-analysis, it just tries to combine results from multiple studies to find an overall effect size. You remember when I did show this thing, right? You see now in this meta-analysis for prevalence of AR, we are interested in what? Overall what? Effect. And then when you look at that of systematic review, it is not really so different from meta-analysis, but it's just that it just summarizes all the relevant studies on a specific questions to provide an unbiased conclusion. So it follows a system, it follows its guideline to make that summary. Now, in terms of methodology, a literature review is less structured, so it's selective in choosing sources. So you can decide to structure your literature review in your project anyhow you want, right? And that is just how the methodology is. Whereas for a meta-analysis, you try to use what? Statistical techniques to pull data from what? Several studies. And similar to that of the systematic reviews in terms of its methodology, it just follows a predefined and systematic approach, which includes a thorough search and strict criteria. If you can remember very well how I explained it in my previous slide. Now, in terms of the data type, wonderfully, right? A literature review can include both qualitative, quantitative, and narrative. So if you look at your project in your literature review, usually in your chapter 2, you find that some of the citations that are there, some of them, if you look at the reference list, some of them are qualitative studies, some of them are narrative. They can be anything. You're just citing anything. Contrary to a meta-analysis, it must all be what? Numerical data. You can't include a qualitative data in a meta-analysis. But in a systematic review, you can include qualitative or quantitative, but you have to follow a strict criteria for what? Selection. Now, we are getting there. In terms of outcome, a literature review is broad understanding of topics, right? So you try to identify gaps and provide what? Background knowledge. Whereas for a meta-analysis, it's just a single and precise estimate. One number, singular number, that's what it's actually interested in, right? So just think about trying to understand the prevalence of cancer in Nigeria. So you're only interested in one number, 21.5 is the overall prevalence, right? Contrary to here, where you want to do a literature review on prevalence of cancer in Nigeria, and you want to review risk factors, you want to review psychosocial determinants, you want to review a lot of things, you want to go broad in your outcome. But here, it's just a single estimate. And whereas for a systematic review, almost similar like a meta-analysis, but in this case here, it just provides a comprehensive and unbiased summary of the evidence on a specific research question. Now, how about we talk about the title, right? For a literature review, an example could be a review of history and development of cognitive behavioral therapy. Whereas I can have a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials on the effectiveness of what? New drugs for managing hypertension. That was there. And here you can have a systematic review of studies on the dietary interventions for weight loss. So this is just how simple it is. And now one thing we also need to understand is that a systematic review can lead to meta-analysis, but not all systematic reviews leads to meta-analysis. But for you to have a meta-analysis, it has to pass through what? A systematic review. Remember this: literature review broad, systematic reviews, not all systematic reviews will lead to what? Meta-analysis. So just have it in mind that only quantitative, homogeneous, systematic reviews will lead to what? Meta-analysis. We'll still explain that on the course of our lecture. So how about when do we now need to use each approach, right? So this gets me thinking, when am I going to use all the approach? So now I'm going to look at the systematic review, right? I'm going to use it when I need to provide an unbiased summary, right? And I want to inform clinical practice. And it's almost still similar for a meta-analysis. But now I'm going to use a systematic review when I have, lots of evidence and I want to inform clinical decision making, right? And I just want to address a particular specific research question. And I don't want to be biased. I'll still screen them. Now, the same process that works for a systematic review works for a meta-analysis, because a systematic review begets a meta-analysis. But the difference now is that in a meta-analysis, you have it. The studies has to be quantitative. So we will only do a meta-analysis when we all have a quantitative data. They want to now combine all those numbers from what those individual studies. So we can have one single estimate. Remember that in meta-analysis, we just have to have a precise estimate. Now, how about in a literature review? I'm going to choose a literature review when I want to have a broad knowledge, when I want to provide an overall summary, I want to provide background knowledge, I want to tell the wider community what is known about the topic I'm interested in. I want to provide a theoretical context, or I just want to go broad, right? That is when I have to do what? Use a meta-analysis. Now, let's have a rundown of everything we've talked about, the differences, because it is very, very important for us to understand the foundation, because what we're dealing on now is the foundation of a review, right? When a review can turn out to be a systematic, or when it can turn out to be a traditional literature review, or when it can turn out to be a meta-analysis. Now, if you look at this, we said we're going to discuss what's a review, the introduction to various types of reviews, what's a systematic review, what's a meta-analysis, what's a literature review, and the differences, and also when to use it. Now, we expect the review to be as what? To be it's just a way to look at different studies or research papers to see what we already know about the topic, right? So, a lot of books out there, a bunch of books. So, we want to know something about malaria. We have a lot of books on malaria. We read everything and we say, this is what we know about malaria. But now it is just a review. Now, but what are now the types of reviews? So, reading everything about malaria as a bunch of books can come as a systematic review, it can come as a narrative review, it can come as your own love letters or a rapid review, a meta-analysis, editorial, plain reviews, scoping, integrative reviews. I would say we're going to focus on systematic literature reviews or systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and literature reviews. Right. So this is just, we expect it to be like an onion. And we made it clear that here we have all reviews, all these reviews. We've got systematic reviews, and we have systematic reviews with what? Meta-analysis. Now, we expect the systematic review, just like we've done before, to be like a big research project where you gather all the information from many studies on one specific question to find the best answer following a specific guideline. And we'll mention that in our future episode, right? We're going to talk about those diverse guidelines we have for research. Guidelines like PRISMA, guidelines like COSOT, guidelines like the Higgins scale, and a lot of them. And we made it clear that for a systematic review, it's all about a step-by-step plan. And I would say, contrary to a systematic review, that the meta-analysis is more interested in providing a numerical estimate of all those studies. When you want to conduct a meta-analysis, it means that some of the included studies that you have are now numeric. So you want to do what? Provide a numeric summary of those studies using a systematic review approach. So just like example, you want to know what is the effectiveness of a particular medicine, right? So by that way now, you to determine the effectiveness of any therapy, you need quantitative evidence. You need quantitative data to be able to do to determine that. Now, when I explain the literature review now to be like, then you're not trying to pull together all the information that has been known about a particular topic. You just want to pull all the available wide evidence about a particular topic. So you just want to provide us with a big picture of the research. You want to let us know what are the theoretical context, the background knowledge, just unlike systematic review where you're strictly using the PRISMA to find and evaluate a specific type of study using an eligibility criteria. But in the literature review, which is just like your traditional literature review in the chapter 2 of your project, right? You're just reviewing information like in a very broad manner. So we expect that literature reviews is the family tree. It bets systematic reviews, and systematic reviews, not all systematic reviews lead to what? Meta-analysis. In short, in systematic reviews, when the outcomes are heterogeneous, you can't perform a meta-analysis. But when the outcomes are homogeneous, you can do a meta-analysis. We're going to explain that in the future. When we'll be doing our meta-analysis, we'll get to understand that. Then we differentiated a systematic review, the meta-analysis and literature review using the purpose, methodology, data type, outcome, and also gave an example using a topic. Then we said that for purpose, a literature review is more focused on summarizing, existing knowledge, anything that is known about a particular topic. Let's say you want to write a literature review on malaria, is broad. Just tell us all the information that we need to know about malaria. But if you want to do a meta-analysis, you have to be specific. Effectiveness of a particular drug for malaria, then you have to summarize and get the overall effect size. But now in a systematic review now, you can do the same thing, but now you're not really getting an overall effect size, but you just want to follow that same pattern to have your conclusion. We said that in terms of methodology, literature review is less structured. Meta-analysis is using statistical techniques, whereas for systematic literature review, it just follows its defined approach, right? Which is same for meta-analysis. Now, for data type, for literature review, can include both qualitative, quantitative, mixed method, narrative, everything. But in meta-analysis, it's strictly numerical, right? But for systematic literature review, it can be either of them, but you have to follow your strict criteria for selection. Now, in terms of the outcome, we made it clear that for literature review, it's broad, right? And for the meta-analysis, it has to be a single precise estimate. Whereas for your systematic literature review, it is just comprehensive and unbiased summary of evidence on a specific research question. Now, we also provided examples, right, for the titles. And they're actually way more than this. Then we now made it clear that when you need to use each of the approach, right? If you want for you to perform a systematic literature review, you need to know when, right? And that is, first of all, when you want to inform practice. If you remember our last section in our last video, right, we talked about the importance of a systematic review, right? So systematic review is imperative when you want to inform clinical decision making or practice. But you use the meta-analysis usually when you have quantitative data and you want to combine their results to get a more powerful estimate, which will still inform clinical practice or policy. But in literature review, mostly your PhD supervisor is asking you to just continue writing to get as much information on what we know about this. So we headed to exercise. What a very beautiful man who is doing his exercise here, right? So you need to do some of these practice exercise and send them across, right? So match the review types to its purpose. Then we have a second exercise where we need to identify the correct review type. And we have a third exercise where we have to imagine choosing the right approach. So thank you very much for this meeting. So on the 27th, we'll talk about identifying and refining your research question. I think that is where we'll more start with a more practical approach. So thank you.